I wanted to do a different type of video today. Originally, I was going to be discussing my most anticipated games of 2024. It was a great idea for a video that was given to me. However, the more I tried to make this video, the more my mind wandered. The more I thought about it, the more I wanted to do the video on just a single game. The one game I'm truly looking forward to. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. But to really understand why I'm so excited, you have to first understand me. I first played Final Fantasy VII back in 2009, and it was a great experience. I had only just begun playing Final Fantasy games the year before, first starting with Final Fantasy X, my favorite in the series. At the time, Final Fantasy VII for me lived up to the hype, and to this day, it still does. 7 was and is awesome, and it has a special place in my heart as my second favorite Final Fantasy. Once completing it, I went through the motions all the fans usually do. I saw the PS3 tech demo, I watched Advent Children, researched and watched videos on Crisis Core, and ignored Dirge of Cerberus entirely. I, like many, were so interested in Square making a remake of 7. Freshman year of high school, I would often be stuck in the library after school waiting for a ride home, so what better way to spend the time than looking for updates on a 7 remake? As you can imagine, it was a fruitless endeavor. Jump forward to a few years later to the summer of 2015, and my dreams came true. The official announcement that a Final Fantasy VII remake game was in production. Finally, after all that time, I was going to be able to play the game I wanted for so long. All I had to do was wait a short 5 years! As the release drew closer, I was enamored with what I saw. So many great games had come out, and there were many more coming out. The Last of Us is one of my favorite games, and the sequel coming out had me excited, but nothing came close to how I felt about Remake. Remake reminded me what it felt like to be a little kid again with uncontrollable excitement. I could not wait for the game to be in my hands. If there is one story that shows just how much I love this game, it's this one. It released on April 10th, 2020, which was for me a big problem. I was in my first year of law school and finals were in full swing. I needed to study every day from the morning until night, so when would I play? Well, the answer became very clear. I was so excited about Remake that I would wake up at 6 a.m. and play until 8 a.m. every morning, before studying until 11 p.m. Essentially, it was the best motivator for getting up and going to bed. Every night I went to bed with a smile, knowing I got to play this game even for a couple hours in the morning. Before long, I started waking up at 5:30 a.m., then 5 a.m. just to play more before my studying session began. Oddly enough, it never made me tired. It had the opposite effect. It kept me refreshed. I don't think I've ever had a game do that to me before, and I've tried doing this with other games to incentivize getting up early, but no other game ever worked. Remake and what it did to me was different. Then finals ended and I was able to really sink my teeth into this game. The story, characters, and graphics were more than I could ever ask for, and I was brought to tears multiple times. The dialogue and how real the characters were still blow my mind. Anyway, upon completing it, one thing was clear about the ending. Something had changed and things were different, and I loved it. Before long, I was looking at videos and podcasts explaining what was going on, and my love for it grew even deeper. Not everyone was on board, which is okay, but I was for it 100%. I eventually platinumed the game and would play it every once in a while, loving it every time. Of course, there were issues with the game, such as some pacing problems and some average or below average side quests. But to me, personally, this game could not be anything other than a 10 out of 10. The journey this game took me on was second to none. We then got Yuffie's DLC, which was awesome, and then a year after that we got the announcement of Rebirth at the Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary event. Needless to say, I was shaking when I watched it, and I definitely wasn't tearing up at a summer party during the reveal. It was just a trailer of characters walking, and I was all in. Since then, it has really been the only game I've cared about. Sure, I was excited for other games, God of War Ragnarok was awesome and I loved it, but just like Remake, Rebirth is on another level for me, even comparing it to Remake. But now I want to talk about perspective, because what Rebirth seems to be accomplishing with proper perspective is unbelievable, and it's why I'm looking forward to Rebirth so much. There are 3 games that have given me a proper perspective when looking at Rebirth. The first one is of course Remake. We've seen what this development team can do with essentially 2.5 to 3 years of development time. The Remake devs were responsible for pushing out a game with excellent character portrayals, storytelling, and world building. The dialogue and character interactions have never been as good as they were in Remake either. Don't forget the fun, outstanding combat as well. But there were areas that the sequel would need to improve. Exploration was not that good, the game was too linear at times, the aerial combat needed refining, and there needed to be more varied side quests that were great. Both with the good and bad, my expectations have been raised for Rebirth. And then there was Final Fantasy XV, the only other modern single-player Final Fantasy that's open world. I enjoyed 15, but it had its major shortcomings. The world was too big and too empty. 15 really only had 3 unique towns, with the rest being gas stations. The traversal was also not that fun. Running in that huge world wasn't reasonable. Traversal using a car was not fun since it was locked to the roads only, and though updates eventually fixed this, many played the vanilla version where the car was one of the only traversal methods. Chocobos were better, but still janky. Moving on, exploration could be fun at times, but the lack of good dungeons and good rewards for exploration were issues. The story also took a back seat, as the devs needed to focus so much on the open world. This led to storytelling and pacing issues. Of course, the combat and characters were good, and those did a lot of the heavy lifting to make the game good, but on the whole, 15 had some major flaws. Then most recently, there was Final Fantasy XVI. For some reason, I never bought into the hype of 16, and none of the trailers really got me excited either. Then the game came out, and it was pretty much what I expected it to be. It was probably a 7.5 out of 10 for me personally. The spectacle icon fights were great, but in between those sequences had little substance. The story had no twists and was not surprising in any way. The pacing in the second half of the game was bad, most of the side quests were below average, and the world had almost nothing to do in it. It had some big zones, but overall exploration was awful. I remember fighting a larger, tough enemy off the beaten path because I wanted a treasure that was behind it. After beating the enemy, I got my reward, a sharp fang. I stuck that with the hundreds of others I already had. Even in a newer game like 16, exploration and rewards were a serious flaw. But it was the missing Final Fantasy elements that hurt it the most. Only a handful of characters were done well or fleshed out, the RPG mechanics were done poorly or were non-existent. There were no mini-games or other extra content aside from hunts or side quests or the chronolith trials, and the combat had serious flaws. I know not everyone shares my opinion. Some people liked many things that I didn't. Some liked only playing as Clive, or the combat having no elemental weaknesses. That's cool if you like it, but for me, that's a negative. Though I maintain Final Fantasy XVI is still a good game, these missing features and flaws became more evident after more Rebirth trailers and gameplay were shown. You're starting to see the perspective argument I mentioned. Quite simply, Rebirth makes 16 look like child's play. Rebirth reminded many what Final Fantasy should be. Deep RPG mechanics, mini-games, a diverse world to explore and to do many things in, and some of the best characters in the series, just to name a few positives. So reflecting on these games, all of them give me proper perspective when looking at Rebirth. With this perspective, it gives me an even deeper appreciation for Rebirth and what it's doing. Every time I see something new on Rebirth, I'm in awe for what those devs were able to accomplish. If what we've seen is representative of what the game is, then it's going to be absolutely awesome. A dense open world with amazing exploration and combat, multiple fun and unique methods of traversal, a metric ton of mini-games, meaningful side quests and extra content, excellent characters and dialogue, as well as a guaranteed good story with an unknown conclusion. Now sure, the game could release and it could turn out the game isn't that good. Maybe the story pacing is terrible, or most of the world is not as dense or fun as they've made us believe, or something else. But I don't think that's the case. I instead think that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will go down as one of the best Final Fantasies in the series. And to be honest, I don't think I'm wrong. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is not just my most anticipated game of 2024, it's my most anticipated game ever. Some people don't like the direction the devs took with Final Fantasy VII, but for me, I could not be happier. The characters are how I thought they'd be, the combat looks incredible, the world looks like everything I could ever want, and I do not know how this story will end, and it's going to be a game that emotionally destroys me. I'm not kidding, I'm lucky if I get through a new trailer or gameplay video without tearing up. I cannot get through the opening to Advent Children without shedding tears. I'm not going to be ready for what's to come, but I also cannot wait. Anyway, I hope everyone enjoyed this, and I'll see you all in the next video.